I'm Maya, 28, female. I live in a small, quiet apartment that now feels impossibly large, surrounded by the ghosts of a future that was stolen from me. I'm a research associate at a local university, a job that requires meticulous attention to detail, a skill that would soon become my only weapon. Just 3 months ago, my world wasn't just my own. It was a shared universe, co-piloted by my husband, Leo. But a sudden, senseless car accident tore that universe apart, leaving me stranded in the silent wreckage. And just when I thought the pain couldn't get any worse, my in-laws showed me that grief was only the beginning of my nightmare. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our love story was the kind people write books about, or at least the kind you screenshot from social media with a caption like "Someday." We met in college, two nerdy souls who found each other in the quiet corner of the library. He was a brilliant coder, a software engineer who saw the world in lines of logic and elegant solutions. I was a biologist, fascinated by the chaotic, beautiful mess of the natural world. Together, we made sense. He was the structure, and I was the life that grew around it. We married at 25, young and ridiculously optimistic. We bought a modest starter home, a place we filled with mismatched furniture, laughter, and the smell of Leo's terrible attempts at baking. He wasn't just my husband, he was my partner in every sense of the word. We built everything together, from the rickety IKEA bookshelf in the living room to the 5-year plan we'd mapped out on a whiteboard in our office. That plan included travel, career advancements, and eventually, kids. We were on track, hitting every milestone with a shared sense of triumph. Leo was the financial planner of our duo. He handled the investments, the savings, the complicated stuff that made my head spin. "Don't worry, May," he'd say, tapping his temple. "I've got it all secured. I'm building us a fortress, brick by digital brick." I trusted him implicitly. Why wouldn't I? He was the most dependable person I had ever known. His family, on the other hand, was a different story. His mother, Carol, was a retired teacher who always looked at me with a polite but distant smile, as if I were a student she couldn't quite figure out. His older brother, Tom, was a classic salesman, all surface-level charm and a handshake that felt a little too firm. And then there was Tom's wife, Jessica. She curated her life for an audience, her every emotion filtered and captioned for her small-time lifestyle blog. She saw me not as a sister-in-law, but as a rival for attention within the family. While Leo was alive, their behavior was manageable. He acted as a buffer, a shield who deflected their passive-aggressive comments and their thinly veiled jealousy over his success. He'd built a career at a top tech firm, while Tom bounced between sales jobs. The disparity was a source of unspoken tension at every family gathering. I never imagined that Leo's protective shield would be the first thing to vanish. The accident happened on a Tuesday morning. It was a drunk driver, a head-on collision. He was gone instantly. The call from the hospital shattered my reality into a million sharp, jagged pieces. The days that followed were a blur of shock and administrative horror. Phone calls, paperwork, and the hollow, echoing silence in our home. His side of the bed remained cold. His coffee mug sat unwashed by the sink. Every corner of our life was a monument to his absence. At the funeral, I stood numbly as people offered condolences that sounded like they were coming from a great distance. I saw his family across the room, huddled together. Carol was weeping, but Tom and Jessica were whispering, their expressions more calculating than grieving. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that my own sorrow was making me paranoid, but a cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. I felt it then, a primal sense of danger. I was no longer part of their family. I was an outsider, a loose end. Leo, my protector, my partner, was gone, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. I had no idea how alone I truly was, or how quickly his family would prove that the only thing they cared about had been buried with him. The week after the funeral was a suffocating fog. Friends brought casseroles and offered empty platitudes. I appreciated the gesture, but nothing could penetrate the thick wall of grief that had encased me. My best friend, Chloe, was my only anchor. She didn't try to cheer me up. She just sat with me in the silence, letting me cry until I had no tears left. The first direct interaction I had with Leo's family came 5 days after we buried him. They called a family meeting at Carol's house. I assumed it was to discuss his belongings, to share memories, or simply to support one another. How naive I was. I walked into the living room, and the atmosphere was as cold and sterile as a boardroom. Carol sat stiffly in her armchair, while Tom and Jessica were perched on the sofa like a pair of judgmental crows. There were no comforting hugs, no gentle inquiries about how I was holding up. "Maya, thank you for coming." Tom started, his salesman's smile firmly in place. "We know this is a difficult time, but there are some practical matters we need to discuss." Jessica immediately jumped in, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Yes, about the house and Leo's assets. We need to be practical about the future." I was stunned. The future. Leo had been gone for less than 2 weeks. I stared at them, my mind struggling to process the coldness of their agenda. Practical matters, I haven't even gone through his office yet. "Well, there's no time like the present," Jessica said, waving a dismissive hand. "Tom and I were thinking, since you don't have children and this house is really a family home, it would be best if it stayed in the family. We could take it off your hands. It would save you the trouble of selling." The audacity of her statement knocked the air out of my lungs. They weren't offering to help. They were circling like vultures. "Take it off my hands. This is my home. Leo and I built our life here. Leo is gone now, Maya," Carol said quietly, her voice devoid of any warmth. "You're young. You'll move on. This house is too much for one person." I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, cutting through the fog of my grief. "Move on. You're talking about carving up his life, our life, before he's even cold in the ground." This is when Jessica delivered the line that would echo in my mind for months, the words that would become the fuel for everything that came next. She stood up, looking down at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. Her perfectly manicured mask of sympathy dropped, revealing the ugly greed beneath. "Look, let's just be honest," she spat, her voice sharp as glass. "You were a nice little chapter in his life, but it's over now. The family needs to handle the family's assets. Now that your husband is dead, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back. You're not part of this family anymore." Silence. The cruelty of her words hung in the air, so heavy I could barely breathe. Tom didn't object. He just looked down at his shoes, a coward in his wife's shadow. Carol simply stared at me, her expression hardening in agreement. In that one horrific moment, I saw them for who they truly were. They didn't see a grieving widow. They saw an obstacle, a problem to be removed. I stood up, my body trembling with a mixture of rage and profound heartbreak. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just looked each of them in the eye, searing their cold, greedy faces into my memory. "I understand," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Thank you for making your position so clear." I walked out of that house and didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. I stumbled into my empty house, the place they wanted to rip away from me, and collapsed onto the floor. The grief was still there, a gaping wound in my chest. But now, a new feeling was crystallizing from within the pain, a cold, hard diamond, sharp sense of resolve. They had not only disrespected me, but they had desecrated the memory of the man I loved. They thought I was a weak, grieving little widow they could push aside. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea who Leo was, and just how smartly he had built his fortress. For the next few days, I operated on autopilot, fueled by caffeine and a simmering rage. Jessica's words, "pack your bags and never come back," were on a constant loop in my head. They had declared war, and I had no intention of surrendering. My first call was to Chloe. I told her everything, my voice cracking as I repeated Jessica's cruel command. They said what? Chloe's voice was laced with fury. As a paralegal, she had a low tolerance for injustice and an even lower tolerance for bullies. "Maya, they can't just kick you out. You're his wife. You're his next of kin. The law is on your side." "I know," I said, pacing my living room. "But it's not about the law, Chloe. It's about their utter disrespect for Leo. They see him as a bank account, not a person." "Okay," she said, her tone shifting from angry friend to strategic professional. "We need to get ahead of this. First things first, we need to find his will. Did he ever talk about it?" I stopped pacing and thought back. He did. He was always so organized. He told me everything was handled, all stored digitally. He said he had a digital legacy plan. I thought it was just him being a tech geek. "A digital will is absolutely a thing," Chloe confirmed. "We need to find it. Do you have access to his main computer?" That night, I walked into our shared home office for the first time since he passed. The room was exactly as he'd left it. His favorite hoodie was draped over his chair, and a half-finished cup of cold coffee sat on his desk. A fresh wave of grief hit me, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. I took a deep breath, pushing the pain down. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was on a mission. I sat down in his chair and booted up his high-end custom-built PC. The login screen appeared, asking for a password. I tried the usual suspects, our anniversary, my birthday, our dog's name. Nothing worked. Leo, a man who built secure systems for a living, wasn't going to use something so simple. I felt a pang of frustration, but then I remembered something he used to say when he was trying to solve a complex coding problem. The answer is always in the source code, May. You just have to know where to look. I spent hours trying different combinations, my hope dwindling with each failed attempt. Just as I was about to give up, my eyes landed on a small framed photo on his desk. It was a picture of the two of us from our first big trip together, a hiking expedition in the mountains. We were standing at a scenic overlook, and behind us was a sign with the name of the trail, Ridgeback Pass L, 8,248 FT. He loved that trip. He always said that was the moment he knew he was going to marry me. On a whim, I typed in the password, Ridgeback 8,248. The screen flickered and the desktop appeared. I let out a shaky breath, a small victory in a battle I was just beginning to understand. His desktop was impeccably organized with folders for work, projects, and finances. I clicked on the finances A folder, which was, of course, password, protected again. This time I knew where to look. I tried the name of the obscure little diner where we had our first date, combined with the year we met. Greasy Spoon 2015. Success. The folder opened, revealing dozens of subfolders and spreadsheets. It was overwhelming. Bank statements, investment accounts, retirement funds, but one file stood out. It wasn't a spreadsheet or a document. It was a video file named for Maya in case of emergency. My heart hammered against my ribs. With a trembling hand, I clicked the file. The video player opened and Leo's face filled the screen. He was in our office, looking directly into the camera. He looked healthy, happy, and so alive it hurt. "Hey, May," he started, his familiar, warm smile making my eyes well up with tears. "If you're watching this, it means the worst has happened, and I'm so sorry I had to leave you. I love you more than anything." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Now for the boring stuff. I know you hate this, but it's important. I've set everything up for you. The house is fully paid off, and our joint accounts have enough to keep you comfortable for a long time. But there's more, something my family doesn't know about." He leaned in closer to the camera, his expression turning serious. "I never fully trusted them, Maya. I saw how they looked at our life, at our success. So I built a firewall, a separate financial fortress that only you can access. It's where I put the real money, stock options for my company, crypto investments, a few angel investments in startups. It's significant." He explained that there was an encrypted drive on his computer, a digital vault. "The password," he said with a small smile, "is the answer to the question I asked you on Ridgeback Pass. I knew it instantly." After he had proposed, breathless and excited at 8,248 feet, I had jokingly asked him, "Are you absolutely sure?" His answer became our private joke for years. I found the encrypted drive. I typed in the password more than anything. The drive unlocked, revealing a world I never knew existed. It was a portfolio of assets so vast it made my head spin. It was millions, enough to live on for the rest of my life without ever working again. Leo had been right. He had built a fortress, but the most important file was the last one I opened. It was a document titled The Last Will and Testament of Leo Miller, and within it lay the blueprint for my revenge. Staring at the screen, I felt like I had stepped into an alternate reality. The numbers didn't seem real. It was a fortune built in secret, a silent testament to Leo's brilliance and his profound lack of trust in his own family. As I scrolled through the portfolio, a mix of awe and sadness washed over me. He had done all this for us, for our future, while simultaneously preparing for a future without him. Chloe came over the next morning, and I walked her through my discovery. She sat in front of the monitor, her professional paralegal composure slowly dissolving into wide-eyed disbelief. "My God, Maya," she breathed, scrolling through a statement for a cryptocurrency wall at worth a staggering amount. "This is life-changing, more than life-changing. This is generational wealth." He was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. He called it a firewall. I said, my voice quiet. He knew they would come after me. He knew they'd try to take everything. "A firewall is exactly what it is," Chloe said, her mind already shifting into legal mode. "And this changes the entire game. Their claim to the house and his known assets is one thing, but they have no idea this even exists. This is your leverage. This is your power." We spent the entire weekend poring over the contents of the encrypted drive. It was like an archaeological dig into the mind of my late husband. We found evidence of investments in 3 different tech startups, one of which had recently gone public. We found deeds to a small plot of land in a rural area we'd once talked about buying for a cabin. We found a separate life insurance policy, naming me as the sole beneficiary, that was completely independent of the one his family knew about. It was meticulous, brilliant, and a little heartbreaking. Every file, every investment, was a brick in the fortress he'd built to protect me. He had anticipated their greed with chilling accuracy. This is all legally sound, Chloe confirmed after reviewing the documents. Everything is in your name or structured through trusts that you are the sole beneficiary of. They can't touch a penny of this, Maya, as long as they don't know it exists. But they're going to fight me for the house, I said. And the joint savings, they'll drag this through court and make my life a living hell. That, Chloe said, pointing to the screen, is where the will comes in. Let's open it. Let's see what the master planner had in mind for his final move. My hands trembled as I clicked on the document titled The Last Will and Testament of Leo Miller. It was drafted by a top-tier estate lawyer, notarized and digitally signed. It was ironclad. The first few pages were standard. He left all his personal belongings, the house, and the contents of a known joint accounts directly and unequivocally to me, his beloved wife Maya. He explicitly stated that his brother, Tom, and mother, Carol, were to receive a token amount, $1 each, not out of spite, but as a confirmation that they have been considered and intentionally omitted from further inheritance. My jaw dropped. Even Chloe let out a low whistle. He didn't pull any punches, she said, but the real stroke of genius was on the final page, under a section titled Contingency. Leo, in his calm, logical prose, had laid a trap. He had created a separate, massive trust fund, even larger than the investment portfolio I'd already seen. This fund was designated to be split evenly between his mother and brother, but it came with a series of incredibly specific conditions. It was, as the document called it, the benevolence clause. The clause stipulated that to inherit from this trust, his family had to demonstrate goodwill and support towards me during the bereavement period. They were required to provide emotional and material support, respect the sanctity of our shared home, and make no legal or personal challenges to the primary articles of this will. My eyes scanned the text, my heart pounding faster and faster. How could we possibly prove they had violated this? And then I saw it. Leo had defined what would constitute a violation. The list was specific: any legal action to contest the will, any attempt to claim ownership of the primary residence, or any act of verbal or emotional cruelty that caused me significant distress. Chloe, look at this. I whispered, pointing to the last paragraph. How could he enforce that last part? Verbal cruelty is so subjective. Chloe leaned in, her eyes lighting up as she read. Because he's not leaving it up to a judge, Maya. Look, it says any violation will be determined at the sole discretion of the estate's executor. Based on evidence provided, she looked up at me, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across her face. Maya, who is the executor. I scrolled back to the top of the document, and there it was in black and white, Executor Maya Miller. I was the one who held the power. I was the judge and the jury, but there was one final, brilliant, and devastating twist. The document concluded with what it called the charity clause. It stated that if the conditions of the benevolence clause were violated, the entire multi-million-dollar trust fund would not revert to me. Instead, it would be immediately and irrevocably liquidated and donated in its entirety to a list of charities Leo had pre-selected. Charities dedicated to supporting victims of drunk driving accidents. He had created a scenario where their greed would not benefit me, but would instead honor his memory in the most profound way possible. They were holding the key to a fortune, and they had no idea. All they had to do was be decent human beings, and they had already failed. The revelation of the charity clause left me breathless. It was the perfect, most elegant checkmate. Leo hadn't just protected me. He had created a system where his family's own toxicity would become their undoing. Their greed would directly fund a cause born from the very tragedy they were so callously exploiting. It was poetic, it was devastating, and it was my turn to make a move. So what's the plan? Chloe asked, leaning back in her chair. You hold all the cards, Maya. You could just let them know they've messed up and walk away with everything. I shook my head. No, that's not enough. They tried to erase me. They tried to render my marriage, my love for Leo, completely meaningless. They deserve to understand exactly what they've lost. They need to feel the full weight of their actions. My mind, the mind of a research associate trained to collect data and follow protocols, kicked into high gear. Leo had set the parameters. Now I needed the evidence. The verbal cruelty clause was my primary weapon, and Jessica's hateful diatribe was my Exhibit A. The problem was, it was my word against theirs. I needed proof. I need you to think, Maya. Chloe pressed. Was anyone else there? Did anyone overhear it? No, I sighed. It was just me, Tom, Jessica, and Carol in the living room. Then a thought sparked. Carol's house. She was proud of her smart home setup. Leo had helped her install it a few years ago. There were smart speakers in every room and security cameras covering the exterior. There was one inside, her security system. I said, my voice rising with excitement. Leo helped her set it up. There's a camera at the front door for sure. Maybe there's one in the living room. It was a long shot, but it was the only one I had. Hacking into my mother-in-law's security system was legally and ethically a gray area, but considering they had tried to emotionally and financially gut me, I was willing to bend a few rules. Fortunately, I didn't have to do any real hacking. Leo, being the meticulous planner he was, had kept a secure file on his computer with all the family's important account information and passwords for emergencies. He had managed their entire digital lives. With a few clicks, I was in. I accessed the security camera's cloud storage. My heart sank as I saw there was no camera inside the living room itself, but there was one in the hallway, pointed directly at the living room entrance. The video was clear, but the audio was faint, muffled by the distance. I spent hours enhancing the audio, using software to isolate their voices. It wasn't perfect, but it was there. You could hear the change in tone, the aggression in Jessica's voice, and then, faintly but unmistakably, the key phrases, "Husband is dead. Pack your bags. Never come back." It was enough. I saved the file, my hand steady. This was my proof. My next step was to formalize the process. I couldn't just email them a video clip. This had to be official, cold, and inescapable. I contacted the lawyer who had drafted Leo's will, a man named Mr. Harrison. I explained the situation, and after verifying my identity and my status as executor, he agreed to a video conference. I presented him with the will and the contingency clauses. His stoic, professional demeanor slowly transformed into one of quiet admiration. "Your husband was a very thorough man," he commented, a hint of a smile on his face. "This is one of the most unique and well-protected estate plans I have ever encountered." I then explained the events that had transpired at my mother-in-law's house and showed him the video evidence. They made their move just 5 days after the funeral, I explained. They demanded I vacate my home and hand over Leo's assets. Mr. Harrison watched the clip, his expression unreadable. When it was over, he simply nodded. "As the executor of the estate, you have the sole authority to determine if this constitutes a violation of benevolence clause. In my professional opinion, given this evidence, a judge would unequivocally support your determination. Their actions are a clear and profound breach of the conditions set forth by your late husband." He advised me on the proper legal procedure. We would not engage in a messy, public confrontation. There would be no dramatic will reading. The beauty of Leo's plan was its quiet, digital efficiency. The punishment would be delivered not with a shout, but with a click. We drafted an official letter. It was a masterpiece of legal terminology, cold and precise. It outlined the existence of the secondary trust, detailed the exact conditions of the benevolence clause, and stated that, as executor, I had found them to be in violation. It cited the date and time of their verbal assault and noted that I had evidence of their breach. The final paragraph was the kill shot. It informed them that, as per Leo's instructions in the charity clause, the entirety of the multi-million-dollar trust established for their benefit had been forfeited. It was now in the process of being liquidated and transferred to the designated charities. We even attached a list of the charities so they could see exactly where their inheritance was going. The plan was complete. The evidence was gathered. Legal documents were prepared. All that was left was to send it. I was about to execute the final command in the brilliant code my husband had written to protect me. The day I decided to send the email, the air in my apartment felt heavy with anticipation. I sat at Leo's desk, the official letter from Mr. Harrison attached to a new draft addressed to Tom, Jessica, and Carol. For a moment I hesitated. Was this too cruel? Was I stooping to their level? Then I pictured Jessica's sneering face and heard her words echo in my memory. "You're not part of this family anymore." My resolve hardened. This wasn't about cruelty, it was about consequences. Leo had given them a test of character, and they had failed spectacularly. This was simply the result. Chloe was with me, sitting on the edge of the desk, a supportive presence in the quiet room. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath and nodded, ready. My finger hovered over the send button. It felt like pushing a button to launch a rocket, an action that would irrevocably change everything. I clicked it. The email vanished into the ether. A small message sent, confirmation popped up on the screen. It was done. The immediate aftermath was silence. For the rest of the day, there was nothing. No angry phone calls, no frantic texts. It was an unnerving quiet, the calm before a storm. I spent the day trying to distract myself, but my phone felt like a ticking bomb in my pocket. The first explosion came the next morning. It was a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a message popped up. It was from Tom. It was a garbled, furious, and panicked rant. "Maya, what is this? What joke is this? Millions, a charity clause. You can't do this. This is our money, our inheritance. My mother is devastated. You need to call me back right now. You are stealing from us." He called 6 more times in the next hour. I didn't answer. Then came the emails. The first was from Tom, a string of incoherent threats and accusations. He accused me of forging the will, of manipulating his brother, of trying to rob his poor, grieving mother. The second email was from Jessica. Her tone was completely different. The aggression was gone, replaced by a sickly sweet, desperate attempt at manipulation. "Maya, honey," it began, "I think there has been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. We were all just so emotional after losing our dear Leo. Grief makes people say things they don't mean. Of course we love you. Of course you are family. That money was meant for us to help us honor Leo's memory. Surely you can see this is just a mistake. We can fix this. Just tell the lawyer you made an error in judgment. We can forget this whole ugly business ever happened." The whiplash from their different approaches was almost comical. One was threatening me with legal action for enforcing a legal document, while the other was pretending her vicious attack was a simple misunderstanding. They were flailing, throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. The final message came from Carol. It was a single, curt text. "You have destroyed this family." I stared at that message for a long time. "You have destroyed this family." The irony was breathtaking. They had been the ones to draw the battle lines. They were the ones who saw a death as a financial opportunity. They had destroyed the family the moment they decided greed was more important than love. I didn't reply to any of them. There was nothing left to say. My silence was the most powerful response. A week later, Mr. Harrison's office forwarded me a letter they had received from a lawyer hired by Tom. It was a blustering, aggressive letter demanding access to the trust and challenging my authority as executor. Mr. Harrison replied with a simple, 2-sentence letter of his own. It stated that my decision as executor was final and legally binding as per the terms of the will, and attached a copy of the video file from the hallway camera. After that, there was only silence. They knew they had no legal standing. Their greed and cruelty had been recorded, and there was no way to deny it. They had lost, utterly and completely. The fortress Leo had built for me had held, repelling their assault without me ever having to see them in person again. The final confrontation wasn't a shouting match. It was a quiet, digital execution of a perfectly written script. The silence that followed the storm was profound. Angry calls and desperate emails stopped. It was as if a toxic cloud that had been hanging over my life had finally dissipated. The absence of their drama was a relief so deep it felt like I could breathe properly for the first time in months. In the weeks that followed, I worked with Mr. Harrison to finalize the estate. The transfer of the forfeited trust to the charities was completed. I received letters of gratitude from each organization, detailing how the massive donation made in Leo's name would fund victim support programs, awareness campaigns, and grief counseling for families torn apart by drunk driving. Reading those letters, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was the justice Leo deserved. His legacy wasn't going to be a new car for Tom or a designer wardrobe for Jessica. It was going to be helping hundreds of people who had suffered a loss like ours. I sold house. As much as I loved the memories we had made there, it was too full of ghosts. It was a home built for two, and living there alone was a constant, painful reminder of what I had lost. I used a portion of the inheritance to buy a beautiful, light-filled condo in the city, a place that was entirely mine. I also made a significant change in my career. With the financial freedom Leo had given me, I no longer needed to rely on university grants and budgets. I established a private research fund in Leo's name, the Leo Miller Foundation for Ecological Research. I left my job at university and now lead my own projects, focusing on the conservation work I am most passionate about. My work has purpose, a purpose that honors the man who made it all possible. As for his family, I hear snippets of news from a distant cousin who was always kind to me. Tom and Jessica were forced to sell their oversized house. Their lifestyle, funded by loans they had likely taken out in anticipation of a large inheritance, came crashing down. Jessica's lifestyle blog quietly disappeared from the internet. The last I heard, they were renting a small apartment, and Tom was working at a different car dealership. Carol became reclusive, refusing to see most of her old friends. They got what they deserved, I suppose, but I find I don't waste much time thinking about them anymore. They are small, bitter people, and my world is now so much bigger than theirs. I am not the same woman I was before. The grief is still with me. It's a quiet companion now, not a crushing weight. It has carved out a space in my heart that will always belong to Leo. But I am also stronger, more resilient, and more fiercely independent than I ever thought possible. I have learned that love doesn't end with death, and that the best way to honor the past is to build a future worthy of the love you were given. I am Maya, 28, female. I am a scientist, a philanthropist, and a survivor. I am living a life that Leo and I planned together, but I am walking the path on my own now, with his memory as my guide. And for the first time in a long time, I am looking forward to what tomorrow brings.